Well, I don't know if I got already an introduction. My name is Alessandra Riccetti. I'm an architect as background. I'm a public space designer by the City of Amsterdam in the Department of Urban Planning and Sustainability. And I would like to thank the organization for the invitation and for their work also in connecting online. So let me in the Congress online. And I'm glad that this morning I have the opportunity to present you this publication, Biodiversity, a Matter of Vital Soil, creating, implementing and upscaling biodiversity-based measures in public space. I will share the screen. Okay, I hope you can see well. So today I'm delighted I can bring you in a small journey along this publication that was carried out by the City of Amsterdam. So first of all, what's the book about? What's the context in which the book was written? Why vital soil matters in our cities? Which is the role of research in our way as designers and as cities? Our proposal towards a biodiversity city, and a couple of examples of implementation, like how we move further from the publication and what are we doing right now in our team. Since that I'm not there present, this is a picture of the book, and later on I will share with you a web link where actually you are able to download for free the PDFs that is open for everyone, and where you can find also other digital material. First, context. The book was carried out by the City of Amsterdam Urban Planning and Sustainability Department, and I would like to mention as initiators the chief designers Hans van der Made and Joyce van der Berg. And we collaborate. I was part of the editorial team. We collaborate and we join forces outside the City of Amsterdam with knowledge institutions and also private parties. The context, you all know in which kind of context we are living. Cities is the place where everything is taking place. So from social inequalities to energy transition, climate change and risk and consequences, and the maintaining of the old city. And cities are acting in a frame from, they are setting guidelines from a more national, worldwide level, like for instance with the UN SDGs, from the European level, national level, and local level. And I would like to mention a couple of measures in terms of, to give a context in terms of local level. Amsterdam has as a goal by 2050 to become fully circular, by 2030 to reduce 50% of raw material used, and by 2050 as well to become climate neutral cities. We are facing challenges in the city like drought. This is a picture of Amsterdam in dry summer, degradation of soil, and urban in Thailand with 5 degrees higher in the city, temperature higher in the city rather than outside. Flooding events, another challenge, heavy rainfalls, disruption in the sewage system due to the high amount of water and soil that is not able to be permeable, degradation of soil and tree roots. All the works in renewing public space also is breaking the balance in soil. And all the works in public space to allow energy transition and data transition, digitalization. We need space for infrastructure, but right now we are facing and we are struggling in setting and framing the city of tomorrow, giving space for infrastructure, but giving space also for climate adaptation, plants, and biodiversity. So that's needed a good planning, a good programming, a good management. Another issue, another challenge is the lack of data. What we discover is that actually in the study of soil, if we mention, for instance, on geoinformation system like in GIS, we have data about soil, but we are lacking of knowledge of soil in cities. So we arrive till the outskirts. And what we notice is that we found a lot of literature, a lot of information about soil condition outside the city. We can mention that amazing research from FAO, but we were lacking of information in the city itself. And then the question is, why soil? What's its why vital soil is so important? And I'm talking from the perspective of public space designer in the city. Well, city is the place where we know already from 2007 that the majority of residents of worldwide population inhabit cities rather than rural areas. And we know that by 2030, the 70% of the population will live in cities rather than outside. So cities is again the place where everything is happening. But from the other side, if we step back and we try to zoom out a bit and to have a complete picture, we know that if we think about the presence of human being as biomass on Earth, as life, we're representing the 0.01%, while plants on Earth, they are representing the 80% of the total biomass in terms of life. And on the other side, we can even relativize a bit ourselves if we think that in a teaspoon of soil, if it's a good soil, we can encounter more life, way more life than the all inhabitants of the of Earth. And in terms of microorganisms, sorry. And but if on the other side we think about the action and the impact of the anthropic action on Earth, we have some data about, for instance, how much we are consuming in terms of forest, so forest degradation. We are losing, if we do an equivalence per second, 1 football field per second, or that means like 5 million hectares per year. So it's important to step out and rethink about who are we? And the question that is following is, where are we walking on? What is our underfit? Because we are designing public space, but sometimes we are only looking above space, what actually is visible on our horizon. But if we investigate what's underneath, actually the first 80 centimeter or the first meter of soil is rich of different inhabitants that can reorganize in terms of scale from microbes, bacteria, mesofauna, macrofauna, and megafauna, so in terms of dimension. And all those bacteria and all those species of fauna, they are responsible for first, in the first instance, to degrade material, so actually to break down nutrients that are then used from plants, and actually they are guaranteeing us food. And meso, macro, megafauna, so that means earthworms, snails, mole, that are actually called the engineers of soil, which are the ones that are allowing movements in soil, so water permeability, and also that all the heterogeneity of soil is guaranteed. But if we look at some samples, kind of sort of a stratigraphy of soil, we can realize that in the city, we have healthy or organic matter only in the old and historical backyard or in old parks. The expansion district and the suburban industries area actually have a different stratigraphy. That's because in the process of building up was used mainly sand and rubble to cover the new construction sites. So the soil doesn't have the same richness in terms of litter zones and organic matter as the old backyards and parks. And if we look on in terms of threatening habits on global and regional scale, we can actually map which are the activities that had a bad impact on soil Of course, we can talk about urbanization, logistic, transport, deforestation to use raw materials, the construction of new infrastructure above and below ground, and their consequences in terms of landslides, maybe in regions that have no flat areas, the Netherlands, but we are talking more globally. The realization of new paving, so permeability of soil that is not allowing permeability of water and the infiltration of nutrients, the usage of chemicals for agricultural land maintenance, and the salinization process of the soil, which is a consequence of contamination and consequence of acidic rains, and all the heavy infrastructure that is causing a lot of weight on soil. Here is an axonometry that is representing on city level which are the threats for a city according to different activities in cities. So the same, as I mentioned before, the building new infrastructure above and below ground, and the vibration of the infrastructure itself that is breaking the balance of biodiversity in soil. The excavation process for new energy system, like for instance, ATES, I think is the English name, but also bad maintenance of public space and green space. We can mention, for instance, a bad waste management, which is releasing chemicals in soil, but also this idea of tidy green space, clean green space, which is basically then turning into removing litter and leaves, especially in this season, from the green spaces. And this has a big consequence in not promoting organic matter and preservation of healthy, vital soil. Those were some examples in our mapping. But all those activities we can summarize with one big consequence, that is the breaking of ecological network and the ecological system, and what we call the ecological cycle, that is the base of life. If we don't have a good ecological cycle, then it means that we have consequence, because the life of plants is compromised and production of food as well is compromised, and all the water cycle, food cycle are compromised, because in the underground, in a healthy soil, we have all bacteria and microbes that communicate between each other via chemical sign. Could be sound, could be smell, and they are connected to each other via food chain. So that means that trees, for instance, are communicating between each other via fungi network, mainly. So if we are breaking the ecological cycle via our urban activities, we are compromising this natural balance. And what we actually are pointing out in the book is collaboration between different parties. So we, as City of Amsterdam Urban Planning and Sustainability Department, collaborated with in a triangular let's say movement with research departments from a knowledge institution and also private parties, to try to bring and bridge what is research and design practice, to try to fill the gap in design with, and bringing already in a previous step what is research and what are the findings. A nice example is a pilot project, an experiment that was brought out in Artis. Artis is a location in Amsterdam. Is one of the, actually is the oldest botanical garden and park, zoo in the Netherlands. And since that is located more towards the city center, the soil in the park, in the botanical garden, is very rich. It's very good in terms of litter and organic matter. Is preserved, and a study was carried out with Naturalis. Naturalis is a knowledge institution settled in Leiden, always in the Netherlands. The study that was carried out was monitoring and studying the connection between trees and fungi network. And the result that was carried out 2 years ago is that actually the trees that were stated as healthier were the trees that had a major connection in terms of number connection of with fungi network. So scientifically, it wasn't a statement, so it's the outcome of an experiment. But that's already a sign that can be used in terms of design to be conscious about which are the process and the systems also in public space. Another nice input and collaboration that we had with Naturalis was to start to frame a toolkit to choose which kind of plants can be planted, for instance, in public space. Of course, within the municipality, there's knowledge, and there are figures and professions in the field of design in terms of planting. But the mindset was try to associate every plant a kind of performance, so that designers also are aware about which are the performances of certain species of tree rather than others. So that's why those spider webs at the bottom, because you can choose a tree also based on iconic value for sure, but you can also consider which are the capability of the tree in terms of CO2 carbon sequestration or in terms of pollination role, or in terms of fruit production, or in terms of a fungi network. So there are different performances, and it is about bringing more data and information in the design field. In the third part of the book, what we aim is a start. So it's not a complete toolkit, but we try to move from the first part that is more about awareness and to set in the agenda the importance of vital soil in the city. We start to frame a matrix, measure for ecological matrix, soil, water, and management, where in a graphical way, we represent different measures that are touching and are implementing public space design on different scale. So that means on area level, on public network level, public space, site level, and building. That's a categorization that allows us to then move on, and in the future even have a toolkit that is gonna grow. And my goal now is to go through quickly as a kind of carousel to show which kind of measure we included and how do they look like. The importance of the language stating the fact that this book is trying to reach different stakeholders. So it's for research, but also designers, so more visual, what does it mean in practice, and different stakeholders involved in the city, like also residents, students, and policymakers. This is an overview of ecological matrix, and to give you a couple of examples, one example could be connect the green networks on site. So that means also that from the private perspective, it's important to connect backyards. And in the design phase, also consider that which are the sites of animals, which kind of animals run in the backyards. And shall we leave some space in the sense that we just don't divide the private properties, but we allow animals to pass through fences. Consider also the networks during the night. So bats, butterflies, which kind of network do they have? So not only the daily life. Soil, matrix overview. One example is collect and decompose green waste and the use of organic compost. That's also as a social value, because can be a way to store waste from dwellings and then promote organic compost that can be reused also in public space to enrich soil, the first layer. Greening tree mirrors, still related to what we were mentioning before. There is this idea of the tidy green space, the tidy public space, but actually it's proved that more biodiversity is brought when actually we have different levels of green. So instead of having the tree with a clean tree mirror, actually to include more species to allow the transition and to allow different species. Water overview, couple of examples. The water preservation and buffer zones. So to design places in the green area actually that are thought to store more water. These for different multiple beneficial effect. One, for instance, is to store water and to avoid the flooding of public area, and also to avoid the stress on sewage system that can collapse. And in other season, actually, maybe to implement this measure with other solution that can allow the reusage of rainwater in times of scarcity. And this is an example on building level as well. While Amsterdam increased the millimeter per hour of what a private zone should kept in order to be rainproof. And this example is about collect and reuse rainwater for watering plants in the private area, so balcony, green facade, but also what are the zones in the public space. And this is an overview of management, always on different scales. And we are zooming in, for instance, on area level. So to think about facilitate temporary green areas developments, that means that when we know that there is going to be a new development area, we should plan also the temporary use of that area in order to enrich soil. And this works, of course, for contaminated areas. So, for instance, in Amsterdam, we have north of Amsterdam with some old contaminated soil, and they implemented measure to use also ecosystem to purify soil, but can also be applied just in areas that are not that contaminated, but where we can still increase and re-enrich soil to avoid that process that we mentioned before of having only new sand and new rubble in the city. This also about remove litter sparingly in public space. So let's keep the leaves on the green space. Let's actually boost organic matter in public space to enrich soil. And to move from a cluster design to actually an integral design method. That's what we are trying to implement. That means also to think about bringing biodiversity of soil into the design phase. That means that when we are thinking about street design, when we are thinking about building design or public space areas, we have to think above and below ground. We think about trees, but then it means that we need to think also about connection between trees in terms of fungi network, for instance. Try to avoid in terms of maintenance or in terms of phasing of construction, that machine will go in place to break open and close and reopen streets, for instance, multiple times, because every intervention means that we are breaking the balance in the connection in underground. And that means that we are making the vital soil weaker. And this is a video that is summarizing integrality in public space, because if we act integral, then we can be more sustainable. It means that we need to coordinate with all the parties, so the asset managers, the providers, the energy providers, data providers, the designers, the residents, to program, in this case, it's an example of a street profile, to program every asset in order to have space for energy transition, because that's needed, but also for climate adaptation, in a way that also soil is taken into account, to have healthy soil, which is a permeable soil that is connecting green infrastructure in the city, because that's also important to remember that in the city we have green infrastructure, and the streets have an important role in connecting parks and connecting different areas. And now that we talk about the structure of the book and which was the goal, what we try to perform, where are we standing right now? Because the book was already published more than a year ago. And right now, I can present shortly as a follow-up that the experience of biodiversity, a matter of vital soil, didn't finish as publication, so it's not just a book that stands in the bookshelf. But the program, it has a lot of, was a good publication, let's say, that have had some success in terms of getting people on board and aware. And we move further with the City Deal public space. City Deal is an agreement between cities, ministries, and knowledge institutions, setting at the table and bringing further topics, in this case, bringing further biodiversity in soil for vital soil. And last week, this flyer, Tips for Healthy Soil, was published on the website of the City Deal, but also on the our page where we are publishing material for open to everyone. And it's a flyer that gives tips indeed to different stakeholders in the city. So from residents, how can they improve soil quality with their daily action, but also for designers, for managers and policymakers. And this is an example. I hope the video is running. Yes. This is an example of project where we are busy right now. This is not stated, is not defined, not approved, but it's showing how, as designer, also we are trying to implement biodiversity in soil in our daily design. And that's an example of a canal in the city center of Amsterdam. The city center has a lot of complex issues to deal with, and the first is lack of space for infrastructure and historical quay walls to be maintained and to be renewed. And all the trees that have or new trees that have to be planted, and we have to guarantee that we're going to get healthy trees connecting the canals with the parks and the main ecological network. And we are doing that, planning green, starting from water to the quay walls, to the street, to the facade and roof. And we are planning everything also in collaboration with the asset owners, the managers, living space for instance, rootable space. We're calculating 25 cubic meters minimum per tree in order to allow also space for a fungi network and contact between tree roots. And it's in progress, but it's still also change of mindset and starting to look at things from below to above. And as I mentioned before, on the online page, you will find several material. And I would like to share with you the name of the platform, openresearch.amsterdam. There you can find also in English, downloadable material, like the publication that I just presented, and videos and other media that are complementing the information. We are also publishing the events or other workshops, like the information that are possible to be published. And we try to keep it updated, so I will invite you to have a look and to download what you want. Thanks a lot for your attention.